Hello. Welcome back. Real Talk, Real Life, Real Estate, episode 8.
We do
Not
that
feeling confident about that.
every
Episode
time.
8.
Every time. We're like,
yeah. Episode 8. We felt like last week, or our last episode that we did, we wanted to expand further on that, talking about, the importance of buying now if you are in the market to buy, if you're financially able to buy, how important it is to buy. And we wanted to talk a little bit about the risk of waiting. If you wait for interest rates to go down, what you can expect as a buyer, as far as competition. So
not just that. We want to kind of touch on some really cool incentives that we can use now that sellers are willing to actually give to kind of help put the buyers in a better position with monthly payment.
Absolutely.
And things like that. Just, ways to get creative in this market.
Yeah. Yep. So if you're first time joining us, I am Gibby Eagle. I work for Maxim Realtors, and I am a local, born and raised native to Southwest Florida. I've been in the industry for just about 10 years, and I love it. I love educating. I love researching the market. I love working with first-time home buyers and guiding and, just educating as much as possible. That way you can make educated decisions. So I will let Alex introduce herself to you. And if you guys have questions that you want us to cover on our podcast, you can email us at realtalkrealliferealestate@gmail.com. And if this is on YouTube, you can see all of your ways to connect with us in the description.
Yeah. So I am Alexandra King with NRL Mortgage, your local mortgage lender here at Coconut Point in Estero, Florida. I also am very, very passionate with working with first-time home buyers, or just any buyer in general that is looking for someone to slow down and be with them every step of the way. Our Gibby and I's, I think, biggest flex is the fact that we care so deeply about the people that we work with, and we care about your experience, and we want to be there and help you and lead you correctly every step of the way. So
yeah,
that's what we're passionate about.
Yeah, it's rewarding to us rather than just receiving a paycheck and like, okay, next. Like it's rewarding to know that we truly did help somebody, and we know that we got them the best deal possible. We got them into the right home. We got them, it's that you feel comfortable. Like that's the most important thing to us, and that's what makes this career enjoyable.
Absolutely. And that's another reason why we do these podcasts. We want to kind of rip away what the media and people who might not be in the industry are saying. And we want to take all of those lies and we want to replace it with truth and knowledge for you all. So that way you feel more confident maybe approaching a realtor or a loan officer, or maybe you feel more confident taking the next step, knowing what's truly going on from two people who actually work in this industry.
Yeah, because that's the biggest thing too. I've noticed, like I go onto YouTube to, do some research, and it's all the headlines are crash is coming, wait to buy, like all of this stuff that it's like you almost don't even want to click it because it terrifies you. It's like, wait, there's a crash coming. Wait, housing market's going to crash, and it's not true. I truly don't believe that that's going to happen. I mean, I was doing research last night, and it shows that we're up 4% on prices for sale that from last year for this year. So it's up 4% in Lee County. So obviously, some people see price drops and stuff, and they're like, oh, the market's going down, and you're seeing price drops, but those are just price drops because people are either starting to get worried or they just were priced out of line. We're not in the same market we were 2 years ago. So don't confuse it with the market not staying steady.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were just telling me that we're almost to the point where we're getting back to a balanced market.
Yes.
Meaning that there's enough listings and enough buyers to then purchase those listings.
Yep. So, inventory's up 4% as well compared to last month. So that's important too. We're getting more into a balanced market, which I love a balanced market. I mean, it's just everything goes a little bit more smoother. It's like you have the ability to look at many homes and negotiate and stuff like that. Like the market that we're in now, it's a seller's market, but in my eyes, it's really a buyer's market. So it's weird, It's like, there's not a lot of inventory, but sellers are also,
there's not a lot of buyers right
yeah,
now
there's also
either,
not a
though.
lot of buyers. So I'm like, I don't really understand. So
Yeah, it's actually everyone's canceling each other out.
Yeah. So it's like, sellers are willing to negotiate because they're like, crap, interest rates are high and buyers are very limited right now. So you have a lot of negotiating power. So
Right.
it's weird.
No, it's weird, but it also, like, in the weirdness, there's so much goodness. And that's
Yeah.
why we're trying to, like, educate people who are maybe in the market looking to buy, but they've heard from everybody, don't buy, rates are too high.
Yeah.
That's a famous thing. I can't tell you how many people who don't know anything about the housing market have literally said to me, and it's a funny story. So I was sitting at our local watering hole restaurant that I really like, eating dinner one night, working. A woman next to me, someone I was talking to, she heard I did mortgages. So she leans over and she's like, oh, nobody's getting any mortgages nowadays, are they? And I was like, and I looked at her and I said, actually, that's not true. And she goes, rates are so high. I said, I'm aware of that, but some people do need a mortgage to purchase a home. She goes, well, I'm a cash buyer, so I've never had to deal with that before.
Oh.
And I said, well, not for nothing. I said, not a lot of people are in your position. I said, so here's the reality. And I was a little passionate in my conversation with her, but it was more so she was just so arrogant and confident about the way she approached me that I was like, let me tell you what's really happening.
Yeah.
So basically, this podcast today is going to be Gibby and I telling you what's really happening in the market.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to address the elephant in the room. Rates are at the all-time high that they've been in 20 years. Cool. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's talk about all of the really good things that are happening in this market, the reasons you should be purchasing, and then what you can do on the back end. I just feel like there's so many resources and availabilities and reasons to purchase right now if you are in the market. And so I want you all to hear why. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to break it all down.
I also want to point on too that lady's like, oh, I'm a cash buyer, so never had to deal with that. I got a house under contract last week and we had a cash buyer and a finance buyer. Guess who we went with?
The finance buyer.
The finance buyer.
How come?
Because the cash buyer was so arrogant. And we just knew that it was going to, yes, we could probably close sooner and all that, but we just knew that she was going to feel that she had so much leeway that when inspection came and stuff, she was going to start, just becoming a little bit difficult. And the finance buyers were so passionate. They had been beat out so many times on making offers on a home. They wrote my sellers a nice letter. They were first-time home buyers. They have a baby due in February. And when my buyer, I shouldn't have said that. When my buyer, purchased that home that we were selling, they were also first-time home buyers, were getting beat out on everything and were trying to raise a family. So they just felt like it was the right thing to do. And they're like, this is full circle. So we went with the finance buyer instead of the cash buyer. So
I love that story.
Yeah.
Cool.
So just to say, like, cash is not always everything because sometimes they're just a little arrogant.
And when you work with the right people and you have a realtor who has great rapport with, listing agents and, explains the buyer situation, and the buyers are willing to be vulnerable and like, hey, this is where we're at. We're in love with this house. This is what we want to do with it. This is our vision. Sometimes that wins.
It does, yeah.
Because we're all humans. We all have emotions and we all want to see other people win.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, cash isn't always king. So just wanted to throw that one
out
there.
Yep. I had to highlight on that because you brought it up. I'm like, that's perfect.
I love it. See, this is why I love this podcast. We
Yeah.
freelance.
But something else that you pulled up, we were doing a little research, and something I loved about the 5Ds that you were talking about.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So great. Actually, I have a great story to segue into this as well. So I was actually talking with another realtor friend of mine, and she was talking about how she feels like she's handcuffed into her mortgage right now. She has a beautiful home. She bought it in 2020 when the market, new construction was very, very, very affordable back then. Like, I'm talking about, I think she said she paid like, I don't know, we'll say $350. The home is worth well over $5 now. If not more. Actually, I think I'm doing it backwards. I think she paid $550 and it's probably worth over $1 million now.
Okay.
It's worth a lot more money, like double basically what she paid, her and her husband. And she was telling me that she felt like she was handcuffed into her mortgage. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, here's what I'll say. I disagree with that. And I brought up the 5Ds basically. Obviously, not all of them pertain to everybody, but here's the thing: interest rates are not going to matter, and the housing market pricing is not going to matter if you have the 5Ds going on. So, death, sometimes people pass away.
Yeah.
You're not going to keep their home for them. What are the other ones?
Divorce.
I hate that one.
Yeah.
If you get divorced, if you get engaged, diamonds. It's a D, I promise. If you have a lot of high interest rate debt, and that's something I really want to highlight on actually, so I'm going to pause with the last one. High interest rate debt, credit cards are like at like 25, 26, 27% interest rate now. So, and I've been telling people, I said, why, if you have tons of high interest rate debt, what does it matter if your mortgage is 3.5%? Because the reality is the amount of money you are paying out of pocket per month could literally be eliminated if you were just to refinance your mortgage to the 7.99, 8% that we're at right now, and then pull out cash and pay off all of those debts. Because then, yes, your mortgage payment might be higher per month, but your total overall monthly expenditure of debts will be lower. So that is huge and something that you really want to think about, because
I don't think a lot of people think about that.
No, and I mean, it's important.
It's like you're consolidating everything.
You are. And I understand, like, how could I get rid of my 3%? Well, how could you? I mean, how could you not? If you have the ability to pull equity and actually put yourself in a better financial position, take that additional money, maybe pull out the 80% of your equity, take a portion of that, invest it in a money market account. Those returns right now are like 4.5%, almost 5%. That's at an all-time high. It used to be 0.5% that you make back on your money. And it's a super safe place to keep your money. So there's just many things that you can do to make money with your money, except instead of just sitting on it in your home where it's doing nothing but appreciating, but you're not touching it to make it grow more. So,
and a lot of people don't realize too, when you do that, like refinancing to pull that money out, you can use that equity to pay for the closing costs, as you do have to pay closing costs again. So a lot of people are like, oh, I got to pay closing costs again. Just, it comes out of the equity. So it's like out of sight, out of mind.
We loop it in.
Yep.
You come out of pocket with nothing when you refinance. I mean, you
if you have
loop
equity,
it into your loan.
Good amount.
Exactly.
Yeah. But a lot of people don't realize that. It's like, because they're like, I have to pay closing costs again. I'm like, you're getting so much equity out of your home. That's not going to matter.
Yeah. And reality is, you save, like, especially if you, for example, we have a program that if you do your loan through us and you want to refinance later when rates drop, or, I mean, if you needed to refinance now, it's fine. We have the ability to waive some of our fees. So you can waive some of the fees. You're already going to have your owner's title policy, which usually costs money. You're already going to have your survey, which costs money. So you're actually going to be saving money. So it's not going to be as much money out of pocket as it would be when you're closing on a house.
Okay.
But yes, like you said, you can loop it in.
Yeah.
And then diapers. That is the last. People expanding their families.
Yeah.
Needing a bigger home, not knowing what to do because they have 3% interest rates. I mean, yes, but you've also doubled your equity. So it's just one of those, the 5Ds will happen in your life at some point. And the housing market basically doesn't wait for anybody, because life is going to happen. And so you're not going to care about interest rates. You're not going to care about home prices if you're walking through one of these situations.
Yeah. Yep. And that's, I feel like that it goes for sellers and buyers, because sellers go through this, they're going to be more motivated to sell because they're like, okay, I really need to pay this debt. Okay, like I'm moving in with my fiance. I have a baby on the way, so we need to get a bigger home. I'm getting divorced. Get me the heck out of here.
Right? Yeah, like we're done here.
Okay, my spouse died. It could be an emotional thing. They just want to get out, so it works for sellers and it works for buyers. It's So I think that's huge, and that leads into the incentives that you were talking about that could help people, especially in these situations as a buyer, for the incentives like the rate buy downs, and obviously there's less competition and stable prices.
I mean, that's the reality of this market, and it was one of the things that I've been sharing with people. Like, I understand that rates are high. They are. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, I mean, yes, they're high to those people who have never seen rates at 13%. Obviously my parents bought their first house at 13%, but I can't use that example and try to explain that to somebody who's a millennial who just saw rates of 3% with COVID.
Yeah.
So like that, can't compare apples to oranges. So I understand where people are at. But the reality of the situation is you cannot time the market. I mean, trying to time interest rates is like, you can't. It's literally virtually impossible because even the professionals who literally track the market and listen to what the Federal Reserve said, they're looking at the 10-year treasury. Like, even these people who study these things every single day have gotten this wrong this year.
Yeah,
So
I've given up on
yes.
predicting. I've been wrong every
And
year.
so exactly.
Every year.
Even people who are in this industry are still getting it wrong because there's always outliers. There's always factors that are going to come into play. I mean, what I can tell you now is if you can afford the monthly payment, just know that you're not going to be stuck in this monthly payment. It's going to be your worst case scenario at 8%. And then guess what? Rates are going to come down.
They are.
Because
they will.
They will, because the reality is the Federal Reserve has already tightened. Basically, since we pumped so much money into our market during COVID, the Federal Reserve's job is to suck it back out. But they're sucking it out so quickly that they're pushing us into a recession.
Yeah.
And obviously with a recession comes lack of spending, and the spending money comes lack of jobs. And so the good news is the Federal Reserve has already said what they've been doing is working. So we are seeing the trend that that inflation is going to drop and is slowly dropping. And with that, rates will come.
Yep. I was watching a little bit of Dave Ramsey too, and he even said like this market is really controlled by government right now because they're trying to stable things, and it is getting more stabilized. So I mean, I do truly believe that they will come down.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say when because always never. You just can't. I don't have a crystal ball, so.
I mean, I would say give it a year.
Yeah. That's how I feel. Like elections coming up.
Yep.
Election time, rates usually always go down because it's one of those, hey, you vote for me, I'm going to help
look what I can
rates.
do.
Yeah. And it magically
goes
down. So, and that's the thing too. It's like, yes, you do need to be comfortable with your mortgage payments. And if you are comfortable, if you can just suck it up and make some, just changes in your lifestyle, if you need to make those mortgage payments that you're not married to your mortgage, then I would do it because it could be just a year. It could be.
Right.
But
and then at that point you have the right, you have the right and the ability to
refinance, and you're definitely 1,000% going to have equity in your home.
Yes.
So it's a double whammy. You refinance for those lower interest rates and you pull out that equity at the same time and use it to pay down other debt or maybe buy another house when the interest rates are low.
Exactly. Or there's some people who are like, my roof is going to need to get repaired and I bought the house this way. Okay, cool. Let's pull out your equity. Let's use that money to replace the roof. Or maybe do some cosmetic things on the inside. I mean, I don't know. There's plenty of people who bought the home not the way they wanted it. So like, that's another way you can use your equity to start fixing up the home projects that you want to do. I mean, I know that in this market, people are very concerned about their finances, and that might not be what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
But it is always an option. There's.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and I want to talk about too. I mean, now that we're on the topic of buying now, there is risk of waiting too. If you decide to wait for those lower interest rates, I know we talked about in the last podcast episode, but the risk of waiting is all the other buyers that are maybe like you or somebody else that's sitting on the sidelines waiting. They're all going to jump back in because they're like, oh, interest rates are low again. But then you're going back into bidding wars. You're going into multiple offer situations. You're getting beat out time after time after time. You are offering over asking on those homes. So I'll tell you, you're not walking into that home with equity. And who knows when you will have equity on that property. Yes, obviously the market is increasing, so you will at some point, I do believe. But the risk with that as well is when you're in those multiple offer situations and you're in bidding wars, you're at the risk of potentially waiving your inspection period, which I do not recommend. Like if you're going to spend $400,000+ or $250,000 on a home and you're going to waive a $400-$500 inspection just to see if the home is okay for you and you're comfortable with it, that's silly. And it's mean of sellers to do that to people, because I'm like, put yourself in those buyers' shoes. You're also at the risk of using a standard residential contract, which I absolutely despise. It's more in the seller's best interest because you're not going into a home as is. So as with an as is contract, you are going into it. You're allowed an inspection period. If you determine the home is not comfortable for you and you're not comfortable with the condition it's in, you get to walk away with your escrow. With a standard residential contract, you don't get to do that. You are locked in. You get to have an inspection, but the seller is required to give up to like 1.5% for mechanical issues, for wood destroying organism issues, and if they need to fix anything for appraisal reasons. But you're locked in.
Just for those, escrow is the same thing as your deposit that you're putting down on the home.
Yeah, your good faith deposit that you're normally required to deposit within 3 days of executed contract. Just putting your good foot forward, and that does go towards your down payment.
Yeah, so imagine signing a contract stating that you might lose this money if, God forbid, you're waiving the period in time, basically,
that protects you to do your due diligence,
right? To make sure that you actually want to buy this house. And I always tell, I explain the different types of pieces of the contract, to my buyers, as I know the realtors do as well. But as we're working together,
it's smart.
I want to be like, okay, well, in your inspection period, okay, yep, no, we got 10 days from this date. That means you can back out for no reason. I said, but after that, we're now onto the financing contingency. So if anything, God forbid, changes in your income, or if you were getting a gift, here's a great example. If you were getting a gift, say, I had borrowers under contract. Her boyfriend was giving the remaining portion of the gift for her. They broke up a week before closing. So in that moment, I now have to deny the file because we no longer have the funds to close. But she's protected by that contingency of financing. In the market that we were in previously, there were 0 contingencies. So guess what? Figure it out, because you are legally bound now to purchase this home.
Yep.
So you will figure out how to get the money.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Good point, because then, a lot of times, what I saw, you're waiving appraisal contingency. So say you're going into home offering over asking, there's a potential it's not going to appraise, and you have to come up with that money in cash to make up the difference. So say you're only, the contract price was $400,000 and it appraises for $320,000. You have to come up with that difference in payment. There's
So, and there's ways that it won't affect you as aggressively as it sounds in those situations, but that's only if you're putting 10% down or more.
Yes.
And a lot of the first time home buyers are not putting down that amount of money. So that's a huge issue. There's some cool things I have this really cool program I want to show you later. This has nothing to do with the podcast.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, we'll show the people. But it's really cool, how you can structure things, and basically, God forbid that happened, with your buyers, if they were putting 10% down or more, there's ways to kind of restructure to not murder them out of pocket.
Well, that's good to know.
And it has to do with mortgage insurance and how you can kind of flip things around. But what I will say is, if you're only putting down the bare minimum, you're screwed.
Yeah.
I hate to say that word, but it's the truth. Then at that point, there's really not a lot of options of restructuring. So
more than likely, if you're waiting, you're probably going to be waiving your financing contingency. You're probably going to be waiving appraisal contingency. You're probably maybe going to be waiving inspection. If you're using, there's some people that will be gracious with a 5-day, but in that type of a market where it's it's hard to get an inspector in 5 days too. So
and there's 9 other people that have backup offers. So sellers aren't really that concerned.
And then say it needs a new AC and a new roof. More than likely, you're not getting anything negotiated, because they already know that they have 5, 6, 7 other people waiting to put an offer in on that home.
And that's why we're saying this market that we're sitting in now, that's why it's not as bad as you think.
Yes.
It is literally one of the most, I have watched my buyers walk into homes with $20,000 in equity. I'm not kidding. $20,000. That's how low the listing price was compared to what the home's actually appraising for. My buyers walking in with $20,000 of equity. And we've negotiated some concessions for closing costs. Are you kidding? So not only are you you're making money in all different ways, and so it's just hard for me to fathom people being so stuck on one portion, which is the rate. I understand it's the rate matters with your monthly payment, and we're not trying to say be house poor or force yourself into a home that you really can't afford. That's not what this conversation is. This conversation is if you can afford the monthly payments, knowing it's not the most comfortable thing, but you can make it work because you know that the end game and the long goal is to refinance. Do it.
Yeah, like say, here's an example. Maybe buy a home that's not all the home for you. It might be a little bit smaller. You might be giving up a few things here and there, but imagine like interest rates go down. You have the ability to refinance, and then you
Mhm.
have the ability to buy another home at a low interest rate and use that money from your equity to buy something else. And then you have an income
Bing, bing,
property.
bing,
It's like,
bing. I mean, girl, boom. I love
and then
that.
buy a bigger home if you need it. It's just
You are
like
speaking my language.
gears are
Exactly.
turning.
There are so many ways to just use this market to your advantage instead of just burying your head in the sand and listening to people yell about interest rates.
Yeah, I'm over it because it's just a thing that people read the headlines. And it's funny because I have like some Florida news stuff that comes to my emails, and the headlines I was reading this morning compared to what they were last year totally contradict what they were last year. And I'm like, freaking stop. Like last year they're saying that this, like, just it's not, doesn't have anything to do with real estate, but it kind of does. They're saying the citrus market in Florida has plummeted and it's being destroyed. And then this year, today it said that the citrus market is like the highest it's been. And I'm like, hello, like, like,
Yeah, it's
but it's just
crazy
one
what
of those
happens in a
things where
year.
it's like they just freak you out. Cause I remember reading that last year and I'm like, oh my God, like Mother Nature is taking her land back. And, it's just like all
Just
this
kidding.
stuff.
She wasn't. She went on vacation.
Yeah. But it just, that's what the media tries to do because they want clicks, they want likes, they want people like up in arms. And same with YouTube. You go on YouTube and you see those headlines like market crash, don't buy now. They want you to click. They do.
I mean, and I've explained this like in the past, and I'm sure you can touch on this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there is no way a market crash is happening because the
No.
reality is in 2008, there was so much inventory.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of homes available and the people that were buying, and not for nothing, the biggest issue was the fact that you could literally make 70K a year and you could have 5 properties that were
Mm-hmm.
mortgaged out. So the foreclosure rate was out of
Yep.
control, which was allowing there to be an excessive amount of inventory in the foreclosure world.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is what we're looking at now, it is actually probably one of the hardest times to be able to get a mortgage.
Yeah.
The guidelines are extremely stringent. Like there are a lot of things in place to not ever allow us to go back to lending to people who are not going to be repaying.
Yeah.
And not for nothing, we still are not even in a balanced market, which
Yeah.
means that there is still not enough inventory. The
Mm-hmm.
only thing that's happened is that the homes, like there's probably still the same amount of homes, but the buyers have slowed down a little bit
Yeah.
because of the rates.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I'm actually thankful that the rates are as high as they are because if they weren't, home prices would continue to climb
Yeah.
astronomically. So then you would have super high home prices and 5.5% interest rates. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, your monthly payment's going to probably be very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
So I just think that, like, I mean, there's checks and balances for a reason. And I think when we only hone in on the one tiny portion, you're missing what's actually happening in the market as a whole.
Yeah. I think it's just important for people to like sit down, with somebody just to like break this stuff down,
Yeah.
like understanding that your debt monthly could be lowered if, there's just certain ways to determine that, like,
Yeah.
just consolidating everything. And yeah, I mean, the interest rate, 8% interest rate in reality is, I mean, yes, it's,
The highest in 20
yeah,
years,
it's the
but
highest it has been, but
that's the
it's,
fun fact.
yeah,
Cool. Now
yeah.
what are we going to do about
But yeah, but
it?
you're able to have equity and
Mhm.
negotiate rather than,
And while we're still touching on interest rates, I know I did talk last week about the rate buy down.
hmm
It's an amazing program where sellers are already giving credits to buyers. And if you already are in the position where you have enough money for your closing costs and your down payment, which some people do, you can actually take the seller credits and use it to buy down your interest rate.
hmm
So basically, what the seller's money is doing is it's subsidizing your monthly payment for you by prepaying your interest. So it's nothing spooky, kooky, or weird. It's still a 30-year fixed rate. Literally, you just have the seller's money sitting in an escrow account attached to your mortgage. And so that seller's money prepays your interest for you each
Yeah.
month, which then makes it feel like your monthly payment is not as astronomical as it is. And there's
hmm
different types of buy downs. There's a 3-2-1, which means I'll explain that one. Say that it all depends on how much money the seller is willing to give, which that's going to depend what program we can do.
hmm
But if say the seller's willing to give quite a bit of money, the first, so say your interest rate is 8%. So the seller gives you these credits. So the first year that you're in that home, it would literally be like your interest rate was 5%. That would be what your monthly payments would reflect. The next year, it would be like you had a 6% interest rate. Third year, it'd be like you had a 7% interest rate. And then the fourth year, the 8% would come back. Coolest part about this whole thing is you're not stuck in this program. You can refinance at any time and take those credits with you to go towards your principal and interest. So it's a win-win.
Yeah.
It's, and there's a couple other different programs if there's less money the seller's willing to give. But
what's like a good amount? Is that easy to
So it's
say?
Based on loan amount.
Okay.
So it honestly is going to vary. I would say probably like on an average loan, like you would probably need like 17 to 20 for the 3-2-1. I would honestly say the 2-1 buy down, which would be like 6% and 7%, then 8%. I would say that one's closer to like the 10K. So I think that's more realistic for the seller concession area that we're in. But it really does vary. And I have a calculator that we can plug everything into to determine like what you would need to ask them for if we were going to go that route. But it really does help take that burden off of the buyer, and it helps the seller, if they're willing to give, it makes their property more like buyers are interested in paying less out of pocket. Like so if we can work together, make your listing look way more like, actually, you know what? They're giving me $10,000 to buy down my rate to subsidize my payments. I'm in.
Yeah.
And then the buyer doesn't feel like the 8% is that big of a deal anymore all of a sudden.
Yep. That's awesome.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to get creative right now. And I think it's just buyers getting out of that fear and just actually seeing what they're capable of and what it actually looks like, because everyone else is making it scary.
Exactly. And so that's why we kind of just wanted to dive back in and kind of talk about the risks of waiting, the ways that we can get creative now, and why 8% isn't as bad as people think it is.
Yeah, why 8% isn't as bad as bidding wars and multiple offers and waiving your whole.
I hated that market.
Like, you're putting so much risk into buying in that type of a market.
You are.
If you're not a cash buyer.
You are. And at the end of the day, I would way rather walk into a home that I have equity in with an 8% interest rate than purchase a home at a 5 or 6% interest rate where I have negative equity because I had to go above the asking price and it didn't appraise.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I personally feel like if you're an investor, you're looking for, annual rental or Airbnb or something like that, I personally don't feel this is the market for that. This is more for like your primary home. Like, because to compare what your mortgage would be compared to what you would actually be able to rent it out monthly, the numbers don't really make sense unless you're comfortable with it, just knowing that you have a property and you know what, hey, I'm breaking somewhat even, and in a year or so I will be able to make a little bit more, then that's understandable.
Yes, of course. I mean, it's more about the long game right now and what your goals are. If it's not for your primary, then what are you looking to do, and are you okay with where you're at?
Yes, exactly.
But those are all things that you have to just talk to someone about and have real, honest conversations. Gibby and I are never going to sell you something you don't need. We're going to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
Once we listen to your goals and hear what you're looking to do, like, we're going to be honest with you of what you need to do to get there.
Yeah. Sometimes I even apologize to buyers because I'm like, I'm sorry. Sometimes I educate a little too much. And they're like, no, I actually appreciate it because you're educating me and I'm able to make a decision. Like, I will never let you go into something blind. You will have everything laid out on the table, if there's assessments or there's just so many things that, that you can be educated about, or flood zone stuff like that you'll know whether you're comfortable moving into that property.
Absolutely. So that's what we're here for. So with all of that, if you guys have any questions about anything, you can email us at
Real Talk, Real Life, Real Estate @gmail.com.
Yes, we'd be happy to answer those questions. Or you can call us, text us, follow us on social media. Everything's below in the YouTube link.
Yep. And I think that's about it.
That's all we got for today.
Yep. And again, I'm Gibby.
Alex.
And we will see you next time for episode 9.
Bye.
Bye.